So without further ado, Tracy Penfield is the founding director of SafeArt, a healing arts nonprofit based in Chelsea. She was raised in the Upper Valley and spent time in Utah and Montana, and is a visual and performing artist. And she founded SafeArt following her own experiences dealing with and healing from a destructive relationship and marriage. In A Curriculum of Courage, which has a really great cover also, she builds on the 17-year history of SafeArt, working in the territory of abuse and trauma and healing. And by employing principles based in scientific study and experientially proven through workshops, she has created a book that encourages healing arts programs in schools and in communities. Just one last note, the Kirkus Review, which is a pretty tough reviewer, described the book as, quote, a beautifully rendered instruction to a remarkable healing initiative and a useful toolkit, end quote. So, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Liza. You are very important. Like I said, if it weren't for her and Sarah and the bookstore, we wouldn't be here. And I'm really, really happy always when I get to come to Norwich, because I try to come in here and just look around, and I'm so happy that you're an independent local bookstore in this day and age. Thank you, thank you. And that you support local authors and have these wonderful events. And I'm really happy, delighted to have you all here. Many of you I know. And I do want to thank the Valley News for the article that they ran yesterday. I really appreciate their attentiveness and ability to listen. And I'm going to be introducing Mitch a little bit later, but she's sitting up here because she is going to co-present with me. She has been a SafeArt participant and a volunteer for fundraising events, a volunteer facilitator, and is now also on our board. So I'm really pleased that Mitch is here tonight as well. I am going to dive right in, and when we'll finish in time for questions. And I guess if you have a burning question about something that I'm talking about, feel free to put your hand up in the moment. I know how questions can be fleeting. And also, I'll probably be asking you some questions. I like to find out what your thoughts are about certain things, and I like to ask questions. I like to be interactive. And I love the idea of the chair thing. I think we're going to all stand up and do it together like a piece of choreography. Kick the backs of your chairs. All right, I'm going to start with the title of the book. We're just going to dive right in with that. A Curriculum of Courage. What does the word curriculum mean? Anyone? Running? Anything else? Curriculum. Program? Plan? Okay, yes. Most of my questions have many, many right answers. And one definition in the dictionary is simply a course of study. How about courage? What does the word courage mean? Where does it come from? Heart. Yes, the French word for heart, cœur. And in my definition, it means wholehearted. Courage means to be wholehearted, open-hearted, and to do with heart. So really, this is a course of study on being open and wholehearted. And as I mentioned in the article, it's not meant to be an academic tome. It's meant to be user-friendly. And while in some ways it might have seemed or seems to be directed towards educators and therapists and medical people and agencies who deal with things like domestic and sexual violence, because it does deal with the territory of abuse. It's also being used by a number of people I've shared it with who are in therapeutic situations, are healing from trauma, and they're discovering a lot about themselves. And there's a mindfulness section, there's a self-care chapter. there's also a chapter on the neurobiology of trauma. I'm going to be talking about all that a little bit later. Now I have to figure out how to read. I might have to put this on the stand. I'm going to read to you, the first thing I'm going to read to you is the Frontispiece. And I just assume that you shut your book and not read along with me, just because that could happen later. And I like the idea of the sound of these words. These words were written by a friend of mine who some of you may know either personally or through her writing, Terry Tempest Williams, who has also been supported at readings by the Norwich Bookstore when she's here. And she's a Western author, but she writes about global situations and passions. And I was looking for something to put in the front, and this jumped out of a book of her essays called A Voice in the Wilderness. The courage to tell the truth through art is, I believe, a radical form of play. It is a testament to the transformative power of art, the transcendent power of art. The teacher who was behind the poetry of the children was taken to Auschwitz and killed, but her suitcase remained with 4,000 manuscripts. These are the acts of courage. Call it art, call it play, call it spiritual resistance. I think it is all the same impulse. It's not being immobilized by the dark, but finding instead that creative spark inside, a strike moment, a match illuminated through an act of friction. A match illuminated through an act of friction. I'm going to come back to friction in a moment. Well, actually, I'm going to say something right now about friction, because it seems to me no matter what one's ideologies are, what your political leanings or who you voted for in this recent election cycle, that we are in a time of friction, of social friction. And there seems to be no doubt about that. And friction, in that sense, can be very positive. It can lead us towards change. And hopefully, in this case, towards becoming less divided and more united, if we can play together, if we can talk together, if we can create together. And making art, or simply, art sometimes means to people, performance and what you see on walls of galleries. And to me, it's much broader than that, but that's why I often use the term creative expression. SafeArt was formed, as Liza said, in part, from my own experience as healing from a very long and destructive relationship that began when I was 14 years old, when I was in high school sweetheart. And I did not know, I was clueless about power and control, or actually what I now call domination and control. Power can be a very positive thing. So I prefer to keep power in the positive realm, domination and control. And although there were many wonderful elements of that relationship, many constructive elements, as I got into my 20s, the destructive began to overweigh the constructive. And when I was I was 29 at the time, I ejected myself and formally left it at the age of 30. And dance, the discovery of dance and the language of the body, the language of movement and of the interconnectedness of the mind and the body, is what empowered me eventually to leave. And I still was clueless about what that relationship was about. I didn't understand until many years later, when some intuitive inner force led me to volunteer for SafeLine, which is a sister agency to WISE. WISE works here in the Upper Valley. Up in Orange County, we have SafeLine. And I volunteered for the hotline. And during the training, I nearly fell off my chair numerous times because of how much I related to what I was learning in terms of that relationship I'd been in. I had never called it abusive. I had not known to call it, name it, label it what it was. And then doing the hotline work was very, very intense, was very educational, and led eventually to the germination of an idea that became SafeArt, which was, I had been a visiting artist for years in both fiber arts and dance, in schools, mostly in elementary schools, but I'd been teaching community dance classes and with people of all ages, and I noticed how movement changed people. And working with fiber did too. Any creative, expressive element. Sam Moffat, Sam's in the back there, and she and I did a lot of residencies together. Sam is a musician extraordinaire. And we noticed how it changed the kids we were working with and the teachers. The teachers would come up afterwards and start telling us all their problems. And I thought, why is this happening? I'm not a therapist, I'm a dancer. And anyways, I began, in terms of also my own journey, I began to study trauma. And I'm going to get to trauma and healing a little bit later. But I had many more aha moments and falling off my chair moments and coming to moments. My story is in the front of the book, and it's called Coming To, because this whole process was and still is a process of continually coming to higher levels of consciousness around not only my personal situation in life, but interpersonal and, of course, even bigger, global. I was in DC last weekend, and I tell you, I've moved with a lot of people, but I've never moved with 700,000 people before. It was magnificent. I want to share with you one more story and a poem before I bring Mitch up. And this one goes back to one of our very first high school residencies, and I'm going to get back to friction. I was working with some sophomores in a creative writing class, and this one girl was having a really hard time deciding what her SafeArt project was going to be. We go in, and I know Liza told me to hold this really close, and I'm having a hard time doing that. Can you all hear me? Is this working? Okay. It sounds really loud to me. And the kids could work solo or in pairs. They could write a skit, they could write poems or stories or letters, and we helped them with the form and we helped them with the content. Although in SafeArt, content rules. We want what you're writing about to be the most important part of your expression, and not that it's a perfectly composed poem. In this case, it was writing. And this one girl, every day she would come in and she would struggle and she'd cry and she'd tear things up, and she was really experiencing a lot of internal friction about what to do. And finally, on the last day before we were going to have this school-wide presentation, she gave up. She said, I just can't do this. I'm not going to present anything. And I said, that's fine. No one's forcing you to. You don't need to. Maybe sometime later it will flow out. It's absolutely fine. The next day, the day of the performance, I'm standing on the stage, kind of like this, only there was a drop. And all of a sudden, I felt this tap on my leg. And I looked down, and it was this girl, and she handed me a piece of pink paper that had been folded and folded and folded into a tiny little square about this size of pink paper. And she just handed it to me and walked away. And when I unfolded it, this is what was on it.
You see, there's a knob on this, so you keep falling down.
Yeah, I didn't think it was falling, but maybe it was. Yeah, Mitch is going to have to put it higher. See if I have it. I wrote down the page over there, but I think I know it. And I did read this in front of the school that day, and anonymously. although people who saw her give it to me might have realized what was going on. Flashback. I looked up, but I couldn't bear to see the sight that was in front of me. I ran away with all my speed, but you caught up and took the lead. I could not run away from you, if only you knew the things you do. This is the only way I can tell you. The wedding night, you hid your drink. Flashback. Mom is pouring Dad's beer into the sink. The day I caught you smoking pot. Flashback. There are bags of grass in Daddy's car. Mom says he was caught. Last night, you said you'd drink in the car. Flashback. 6 years old, Daddy takes me to a bar. Today you got mad and pushed your brother down. Flashback. I don't know why Daddy's mad enough to throw me to the ground. Today I tried to get away, but you reached out and gripped my arm. Flashback. His hands left marks and bruises. He told Mom he meant no harm. My friends tell me to leave you. They say you are no good. Flashback. I begged Mom to get rid of Dad. She said she never could. They say if your daddy hurts your mom, your husband will hurt you too. I promised myself it wouldn't happen to me. So what do I say about you? 15 years old. Struggled with all that friction for a week, and when I went and found her afterwards and hugged her and thanked her, she said that, I guess it was the night before, it just came. That all just flowed out of her in like 10 minutes after all that struggle through the week. And sometimes, as any of you, maybe all of you know, when you're being creatively expressive, that happens. Sometimes it just flows, and then it's glorious. And other times you have to push and pull and nag it and worry it and leave it and come back to it. And no matter what it is you're looking at. So, yeah, this young woman really stays in my mind. And this was one of the first residencies back in, I think it was in '02. And we often perform this piece with one person reading it and either one or two dancers performing the piece. There's not really enough room to dance here tonight, so I just decided to read it. Okay, I'm going to ask Mitch up to share parts of her story, and then I'll be back in a moment.
I am not, well, I don't do good with a microphone at all. I guess I'll just hold on my hand until That's what I heard. I know the last time I spoke with a microphone, you know, that people were yelling, you gotta hold it closer. You know, I don't know. I find it uncomfortable to have it really close, but you can all hear me? Okay. So I have known Tracy now for since 2003. I was a member of a healing arts women's group for many, many years. It changed me. It saved my life. It was a big part of why I'm here today speaking. It's definitely not somewhere I ever thought I would be. I never thought I would be well enough to talk about this subject. Actually, after I met Tracy, she was doing a lot of performances. She had a teen ensemble, and they had all these performances. And we had Safeline there also, you know, to help anybody, you know, who had trouble that had to leave the room. Every single time, I was the one that left the room and was with Safeline, you know, and it happened over and over. And so I don't know what happened, but it was like all of a sudden over the past year, you know, it was, I'm okay. And now I am facilitating the same kind of group. And yeah, and it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful feeling. I never expected to heal, I guess. You know, I really expected to be caught in this horrible post-traumatic stress situation and be fearful of any loud sound or, you know, meeting new people or any new situation. So anyway, I'm here to tell my story. I'm not going to read it, I don't think, but I have my own page in the book, which is really, really exciting. Yeah, let's see. Yes, 138. I was part of a group of people, women, that designed this sculpture on the front. And also on my page it shows how Tracy and I are threading the hair of her, and that was quite a treat to do that. It was hard. Yeah, and it turned into be a really beautiful piece, and you'll see more pictures of that inside the book. Back in 2003, I had just moved to South Royalton the year before, and I was having a hard time. And my wife, Anne, who's here, and I were going into the South Royalton market, and, you know, to buy groceries or whatever. And I stopped there in the doorway, and there's all these, you know, posters and signs and things. And, you know, and I read this, and it said, Anne and I read it together, and it said, women's group, you know, in South Royalton, meeting every week. You know, do you have any trouble, you know, if you've been traumatized? Or I think at that time, it was pretty specific to abuse, whether you were in an abusive relationship there, or, I mean, then, or something previous. And it had all this information, and Anne looked at me and said, "Oh, honey, you should go to this." And I looked at her and I said, "I am not going," and I stomped my way into the store. So she didn't bring it up again until the next time we were going into the market, and she said, "Oh, honey, you should go to this." And I said, "I'm not going," and I stomped my way into the store. Well, then my daughter came to visit, and we were going into the market, and she says, "Oh, Mom, you should go to this." I really stopped that time, but I have to thank Anne for not giving up. You know, she didn't give up. She knew it would be good for me. The reason I didn't want to go was I was really afraid that I would have to go to this group, and I would be surrounded by people who had just as horrible stories to tell as I did, and I wouldn't have been able to handle it at that point. I mean, I wasn't able to handle it until this past year. So I did a lot of work. I think Tracy's one of the people who've said to me, "I've never known anyone who's done as much work as you." You know, I wasn't going to give up. I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to live the way I was. And so I just kept going and going. And so, you know, last year that took 12 years of a lot of work, a lot of healing. And so I went to the group, and Anne tells the story that I was like a kindergartner, really mad about having to go to the first day of school. You know, I didn't want to go, but I was just going because she thought I should. So off I went, and it was actually Tracy and I and one other woman, and we were meeting in this, I don't know, I thought that place was kind of creepy. It was kind of creepy. Yeah, it wasn't the best. The best space. The only really good thing about it was like right next to the train tracks. and the train would come, and you could just stand there and yell, and nobody could hear you. So that was the best part of the whole thing there. But and I came home, and Anne said I came home and I was like a changed person. I was so excited. You know, it was great. And, you know, I don't know, I saw we danced, and I don't think we did any art. Tracy had us, I don't know, on the floor and rolling around and doing these dance moves. And, you know, I'm like, oh, I don't know if this is for me. But I felt really good, you know, when I came out of there. And I just want to make a note, when we speak about art, you know, we're not really speaking about art, we're really speaking about the creative process. You know, it's about being creative. You know, you don't have to be an artist. You don't have to be an artist to do art. It's just really about finding your creativity and following that and letting that you know, move you in whatever direction you need to go. And I am a collage artist. I've done many shows on my own. I organize shows for SafeArt once a year at different venues. We're having one actually in April. It's every April at the South Royalton Market. I have been very involved with different groups and different art projects, and Tracy likes to say this, but I'm going to say it. That I am now teaching art to children in an after-school program. And so my life has taken a direction that I never expected it to. I was actually working at Krell when I met Tracy, so I never expected to be where I am, but it's a fabulous, fabulous place. You know, and I just, this really works. It's a wonderful thing. You know, it's great for anybody to use, really. I don't think, you know, you have to really have suffered from trauma, but even if you're, you know, just having a hard time, you know, or you're just not feeling good or something, you know, just to sit down and do something creative, it changes your mood, changes your direction. I mean, it always lifts me way up. I could be in a terrible place and, you know, I start playing with colored pencils or something, and all of that goes away. Yeah. So, I think I'm probably done talking. I think that's all my page said. I'm the comedy part of the presentation.
Thank you, Mitch. She's actually going to come back and read a poem at the very end. I'm going to take you now on a little daydream. So I invite you to maybe give yourself a little shake, a little wiggle. Maybe relax your jaw, which might make you yawn, but that's okay. Relax your tongue. Yeah, move your head around, maybe roll your shoulders. And then if you're comfortable, I just do it automatically. If you're comfortable doing so, lower your lids, your eyelids. And if you're not, you could just soft focus on something in front of you. Get rid of this again. And find your breath. Find your breath that is a cycle, not in stop, out stop, but simply around, with a little suspension, a moment of suspension at the top and the bottom of the breath. Just easy, easy breaths. Relax your belly, relax your shoulders, maybe wiggle your fingers. And I'm going to play this little chime right now. And I just invite you, whether your eyes are soft focused or are closed, so to speak, closed to the outside, just listen. It's not about, there's no right or wrong here, or no winning or losing. It's just about listening. Listen to this tone for as long as you hear it. That's it. Make sure you're still breathing. I know sometimes people tell me that they found that they have stopped breathing while they're listening to it. So bring breath back into your body if that's the case, and then gradually come back into this space for a moment. What does the word trauma mean? Anybody? Shock? Injury? Anything else? Pain? Something destructive? Yeah, those are all right answers. The word trauma is actually Greek, from the Greek language, and it means wound. A wound, not to wound. A wound. And it's really important, maybe everybody here knows this, but I feel like I have to say it in case you don't, that the trauma is not the incident itself. It's not the car accident or the illness or the violation of some sort, the assault. It is the residual energy that is left in the being after that event has perhaps long passed. That's what happened in Mitch's case. She had suffered some violations and some trauma when she was a child that had gotten stuck in her brain. And we don't have time to do our whole Trauma 101 lesson, which is in the book. There's a neurobiology of trauma chapter, and we have a wonderful, actually very fun, interactive lesson that we do with middle school students right on up, where we get everybody drawing their brain and doodling and beginning to understand the very, very basic parts of the brain. It's a very simple brain model, but it works really well for understanding trauma and how one might then release and process and manage traumatic energy from one's being. And why creative expression, the creative process, is very effective in that way. Anybody want to say why? Why you think that is? Release. Mm-hmm. It helps release that energy. And it doesn't rely on our fabulous executive neocortex, which loves patterns and loves ruts and loves to stay in the same, it was all my fault, I'm bad, I will never heal, I am not successful, I'm stupid, I'm lazy, whatever it might be that your neocortex likes to repeat to yourself over and over again. And the creative process can get one's brain, release one's brain from that rut. Because very briefly, in the place where we are very creative, in the midbrain, the limbic system, is where sensory memory is housed, is stored. And sensory memory, of course, is directly related to trauma, the pain, all of the sensory input that happened from anyone's particular trauma. And we get way down into the reptilian complex, where very basic functions and instinct and reflex takes place, and movement. And so when you begin to move and you begin to create and you begin to release through through these parts of the brain and not just talking about something that has happened to you, not what's wrong with you. We don't ask what's wrong with you. We ask what has happened to you. And then we begin to interconnect not just the 3 places of the brain and all the places of the brain, but we begin to bring the body into it as well. In that blog, I mentioned a really wonderful book that I highly recommend if anybody's really interested in getting further into it, which is the relatively new book by Bessel van der Kolk, who is a very, very well-known trauma expert, and he's written a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And it's a pretty big book, but if you're interested, dive into it. It affirms everything we do. and everything I do in private sessions that I lead. Actually, not only at our Healing Arts Center, we don't go to that terrible space anymore. We have a wonderful little Healing Arts Center in Chelsea, and I also practice at the Center for Integrative Health right across the river in Hanover, in a process called tracing, which uses breath work and energy work and movement to process and release and manage trauma. So now we're going to go on another little brief daydream. I'm going to use my marimba here. See if I can set it up so that I can play it and talk into the microphone at the same moment. I hope you'll be able to hear the instrument. I think you will. So I invite you again to either soft focus or close your eyes. We're going to take a little field trip into ourselves. And don't worry, it's going to be a pleasant one. If you follow my prompts, it will be a pleasant one. You might go someplace else on your own. Find your breath again. Allow yourself to relax. You are in a favorite place, a safe place, a sanctuary, a place you love to go. It might be a real place, a physical place. It might be in your imagination. Either way, it is real. What do you see in this place? It might be a place you visit frequently, or maybe you haven't been there in a long time, but your memories of that place are so vivid that you can still visit that place. What do you see with your eyes when you are there? What do you hear? What are the sounds of your safe place, your favorite place, your empowering place? Might be indoors or outdoors. You might be alone or with others. Are you alone? What are the textures associated with this place? What do you feel underfoot or in your hand if you reach out and touch something? What's the temperature? Cool, cold, hot, warm? Is there a breeze? Is there a smell associated with this place? What do you smell? Taste? Is there a taste associated with this place? Anything that you eat or drink, sip? How about movement? the sense of motion. Are you moving? Are you being moved by some other element or force? And how are you feeling emotionally in this place? Serene? Invigorated? Tranquil? Energized? Maybe simply safe? Enjoy being there for another few breaths in all that detail that you have conjured in your memory and in your imagination. And then gradually tuck that memory, your place, away in a pocket in your mind where it will be there for safekeeping. And bring yourself back to the surface of your consciousness and join us in the present time and place we are sharing here. I'm seeing a lot of smiles. Nice, just pleasant little smiles. Visiting that place whenever you feel stress or anxiety, fear, can be an antidote to those feelings. You can go there virtually, just like you did now, only you can do it on your own. You can pull it up while you're in bed, trying to fall asleep. Just go into the most minute details of your place. And this, we use many daydreams and guided meditations, or we have various names for them, in SafeArt, and there are many things we do with them. One thing might be if we were in a group right now, we would be around a table and there would be all sorts of paper and drawing and writing materials on the paper, and you would be invited to draw or write about what you just experienced. And then you would have something actually to take home with you from this experience to help you remember it. And it's also really, it's just very important to have a place like that. And I have had people say to me, well, I don't have a safe place. And when I don't know why it should be more compelling when a child says that to me, but any of us, we all need to have one, even if it's inside ourselves. And so that's the wonderful thing about SafeArt, is that if you don't have one, you make one up. You create one. If you don't have something that you need or want, or if you don't, I'm trying to think of one of the other, one of the daydreams we go on, or one of the stories we create, is a time in your life when you were a proactive bystander, when you made a difference. And if you can't think of one, make one up. Make yourself a hero in the story. And that's so empowering to do that. I'm going to stop because I could go on, but Mitch has one more poem to read, and then we would love to answer any questions. And once, if people are wandering to cookies or books, the books that you have in here need to all come eventually back up here and not be confused with the ones that are out front. They're identical, except that those ones are for the bookstore and can be sold tonight. If they run out, we have more. And so any of the ones in here need to come up here. And I'm happy to answer questions up here too, and you can talk with Mitch. And I'm going to ask Mitch to read this one last poem.
No, I just had to figure it out. This is called Forever Time, and this was written by a 45-year-old woman. The wind swirled and whipped and blew me away, off my feet, away from my soul, in a dark place, dark save for jagged streets of lightning. Could it ever stop? 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 Slowly, 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 the wind died down. The slow forever time began, when nothing mattered, nor did I know where I was. Where had I been? Where? And when? And why? Then everything became still, still and frozen in that forever time. Slowly again, but slightly, slightly again, but slowly, a gentle breeze began, a breeze to gather me together again, warm, sweet, heavenly air, drawing me in with it toward the future and the light.
I just want to say one last quick thing. There's a table back there that has a sign-up sheet. If you want to be added to our email newsletter list or get updates from SafeArt, you can sign up on that table back there. There's also some brochures and some cards of mine. Yep. And we also have a group right now. In fact, it's the group that Mitch is helping facilitate, called the Healing Arts Intensive Care Unit for women at this point. And I want to point it out, and if you're interested to find out more, you could come look at this sheet. It's the only one I could find, but we're looking for some more attendees in this group. It's free of charge. It does meet Wednesdays from 10:30 to 2. It's for people who are struggling with anxiety, abuse, fear, trauma, illness, loss, grief, daily struggle, depression, or really anything. And it's a really wonderful experience. It's a wonderful group. Healthy lunch is shared, usually potluck. So
Where?
it's in Chelsea. It's at our Healing Arts Center, thank you, in Chelsea. So I know it's a little far from here, but we actually we've had someone who traveled from Piermont, and we have someone right now traveling from Hanover. So if anybody is interested in joining this group, come and look at this or take it or talk with me or Mitch. Thank you so much. Now we get to do the chair thing, right?
Are we going to do questions? Tracy?
Yeah.
Are there questions?
Second.
Did you want to open the floor to questions for a minute?
Yes, if people want to ask questions, I get, okay, yes, let's do that. Questions, sorry. I was so worried about going over time.
It's okay.
Does anyone have questions? Any comments? Yes.
I have a question about how long does the trauma that you have when you're this big, how long can that last?
It can last your lifetime. But our brains are such that they're too efficient and too smart to forget. And if a traumatic memory is released, you're unlikely to forget it. However, as Mitch testified, and as I personally can testify for myself and for many other people I've witnessed and worked with, you can heal to the point of managing it so that it doesn't paralyze you, cripple you, pain you on a regular basis. So yes, don't feel discouraged by the first thing I said, because if you do work with it, that's the thing to do. If you try to ignore it or push it aside, it will continue.
Is it should you think of it as a fight?
No, I would rather not think of it as a fight.
Okay.
Think of it as learning to live with it. You're going to have to live with it because it happened, and you can't undo that. However, if you can embrace, I like to say we embrace conflict with creativity. And you could feel that you're in conflict with yourself when you're dealing with this kind of an issue. But if you learn to dance with it, or draw with it, or collage with it, or sing with it, then you can you can move it forward. And I'm happy to talk with you more about that if you want. Yeah. Thank you for the question. It's a good one. Yes?
Talked about regular groups with adults and using arts to help heal. How about with children? Are there regular meetings for children?
We
you
have
repeat
had, at the moment, yeah.
Can you repeat the questions? 'Cause
Oh, sorry,
That's
you're
okay.
right. I'm sorry.
It's fine.
Thank you. He's asking about regular groups for children. We have had after-school groups in Chelsea, and actually we're working on starting one up again. Right now, our youth programming has mostly taken place in schools. Interestingly, things go in cycles. We have had very robust and healthy after-school classes. Right now, it's been hard to get people to come to them because they have sports, because of transportation, even though we will offer it. But in Chelsea and in Randolph, which are the two primary places we've been working, we do have after-school groups if you want to know more about that. I also have had a sexual assault survivor youth group for teens who have survived any sort of sexual violation, and I have run those in Randolph, Chelsea, and here in Hanover. Right now there's not one running because I'm out promoting the book, but it's something that I'll likely start up again. Yeah. Anything else? Questions, comments? Okay.
Thank you so much. This has been great.